You know that sound a refrigerator makes, not the constant, gentle hum you can tune out, but the other one. The one where it suddenly clicks and the compressor kicks in with that deeper, guttural drone. It's a sound I never even noticed before. Now it's the soundtrack to my life. Every time it happens, and it happens maybe 10, 15 times a day, my whole body just seizes up. My stomach plummets, the breath catches in my throat, and I swear to God I can feel the individual hairs on my arms stand on end. Sometimes, if I'm in the kitchen when it starts, I have to grab the edge of the counter just to stay upright. It's a low, vibrating, mechanical whir. The sound of a motor spinning up to speed. It's the sound of a tool. I know it's just a refrigerator. I'm not an idiot. I've tried to tell myself that over and over. I've stood there staring at the stupid white box, whispering, "It's just keeping the milk cold, you moron." But my body doesn't listen. My body remembers something else. It remembers a different low, vibrating whir in a place that was definitely not a kitchen. It all goes back to what happened in Tobias's basement a few months ago. He was my best friend, my best friend. And now I can't even be in the same room as a running appliance without wanting to claw my way out of my own skin. I got out of that basement, I'm alive, I'm here, I'm typing this. But the thing is, I'm not sure all of me made it out. A part of me is still down there in the damp and the dark, listening to that sound get closer. Tobias and I were the kind of friends people make movies about, the kind you think don't exist after college. We met during freshman orientation, both hopelessly lost and trying to find the financial aid office. We bonded over a shared sense of utter bewilderment, and that was it, 15 years. We were the best man at each other's weddings, his lasted, mine didn't. I still remember his speech at mine, how his hands were shaking but his voice was steady. He just told a simple, slightly embarrassing story about us getting locked on a university library roof, and somehow made it a profound statement on loyalty. That was him. When my dad died, it was Tobias who sat with me in the hospital waiting room for 12 straight hours, not saying a word, just being there, a silent, solid presence against the tide of fluorescent lights and hushed whispers. He was a physical therapist, for Christ's sake, a healer. His whole life was about putting people back together, easing their pain. He had this impossibly gentle nature. His patients, even the crustiest old men with bad hips, adored him. They'd bring him baked goods. He was the calm center of our friend group, the one who mediated arguments with a quiet, "Okay, let's all just take a breath." He was the most predictable, reliable, and fundamentally good person I knew. So when he called me that Tuesday, I didn't hesitate. He sounded stressed, but it was a normal kind of stress, the kind anyone would have with a minor domestic disaster. "Mate, you're not gonna believe this," he'd said, his voice a little tight, a little tinny over the phone. "The old pipes in the basement finally gave up the ghost. It's a mess down there. I've got water everywhere. Any chance you could come give me a hand? I think I've got the main valve shut off, but I'm in way over my head." Of course, that's what we did for each other. I didn't even think. I just grabbed my old work boots from the back of the closet. They smelled like dust and forgotten projects. Told my boss I had a family emergency and was in my car within 10 minutes. On the drive over, I was already making a mental list. Wet vac, dehumidifier, maybe call a plumber for a proper look later. I was thinking about logistics, about helping my friend. It was all so mundane, so terrifyingly normal. I pictured his basement, cluttered with old furniture and holiday decorations, a shallow pool of murky water spreading across the concrete floor. I was worried about his stuff getting ruined, about the cost of repairs. The absolute last thing on my mind, the very last thing, was being afraid of Tobias himself. That idea was so alien, so utterly impossible, it would have been like being afraid of gravity suddenly reversing. It wasn't just outside the realm of possibility. It was a violation of the basic laws of my world. When I pulled into his driveway, the first thing I noticed was the quiet. There was no sound of a pump, no frantic activity. The house looked perfectly serene, sitting there in the late afternoon sun. It felt wrong. I got out of my car and the front door opened before I even reached the porch. Tobias stood there smiling. He looked fine, his clothes were dry. "Hey man, thanks for coming so fast," he said, his voice calm, almost placid. "No problem." "Where's the flood?" I asked, peering past him into the immaculate hallway. No muddy footprints, no smell of damp. Yeah, about that. It wasn't as bad as I thought," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "I managed to get most of it with towels, but the main issue is the pipe itself. I'm worried about the joint near the main shutoff. It looks corroded. I was hoping you could get your eyes on it. You're better with this stuff than I am." It made sense, kind of. I was always the more hands-on one in our friendship. I followed him through the house, into the kitchen, and towards the basement door. He was talking the whole time, just light chatter about work, about a new restaurant he and his wife wanted to try. It was all so normal that it made the weirdness feel even weirder. It was like my brain was picking up on two conflicting signals. He opened the basement door and a wave of cool, musty air washed over me. It smelled like earth and something else. A sharp, metallic, almost electric smell like the air after a lightning strike. Ozone, that was it, ozone and mildew. Watch your step, he said, flicking on the single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling. The basement was surprisingly tidy. A few boxes stacked neatly against one wall, an old workbench against the other. The concrete floor was dark and damp in patches, but there was no standing water. I walked over to the far corner where the main water pipe came in from the wall. See, he said, pointing. Right there, that connection. I knelt down for a closer look. The joint looked fine to me, a little old but solid. As I was leaning in, Tobias started talking again, but his tone had shifted. It was low, almost like a lecture. You know, everything has a frequency, Will, he said. Our bodies, our cells, they all vibrate, but sometimes things can attach themselves. Negative energies, parasitic entities that disrupt our natural resonance. I stayed crouched, my fingers tracing the cold copper pipe. What are you talking about, man? I asked, a nervous laugh in my voice. You've been reading some weird stuff online. It's not weird, it's science. It's just not the science they want us to know, he continued, his voice getting more intense, more certain. They feed on us, they cause sickness, depression, anxiety. They latch on deep in the tissue and they corrupt our frequency from the inside out. They have to be cleansed. Purified. I slowly stood up and turned to face him. The friendly, familiar light in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by something else. A placid, unnerving certainty. A kind of serene fanaticism, and that's when I realized. There was no leak, there never was. The damp on the floor wasn't from a broken pipe. The whole thing was a lie to get me down here. He saw the understanding dawn on my face. The shift from confusion to fear, and he didn't even flinch. His expression remained one of serene, almost pitying concern. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. It was the look a doctor gives you before delivering a terminal diagnosis. You've been carrying it for a long time, Will, he said, his voice soft as if he were comforting a child. I can see it, the fatigue, the sadness since your divorce. It's not you, it's a deep-seated attachment, but don't worry, I can fix it, I can help you. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My mouth was so dry it felt like it was full of sand. Tobias, what the hell is going on? You're scaring me, man. SOH. Fear is just the entity's defense mechanism, he whispered, taking a slow step towards his workbench. It doesn't want to be removed. And that's when he picked it up. A heavy-duty cordless drill. It was an expensive one, a brand I recognized. On his workbench, it had just been a tool. But in his hand, as he turned to face me with that beatific, insane smile, it became something else entirely. It was an instrument. The resonance has to be precise, he said, his eyes gleaming in the dim light of the single bulb. He held up the drill, admiring it. It took me weeks to get the frequency right. It creates a harmonic vibration that will shatter the entity's connection to your cellular structure. It might be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for the purification. He clicked a button on the side and the drill whirred to life. Zzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzz concrete room vibrating through the soles of my shoes. It was the sound my refrigerator makes, but 1,000 times more menacing. My brain just shut down. I was paralyzed, a rabbit in the headlights, my back pressed against the cold, damp concrete wall. I watched him, my best friend, the man who held my daughter at her christening, walk towards me with a spinning power tool, his face a mask of profound and loving madness. He was only a few feet away. I could smell the ozone coming off the motor. I could see the polished glint of the drill bit. My life wasn't flashing before my eyes. There was nothing. Just that sound and his face, and the certain knowledge that I was about to die. And then, in a moment of what I can only describe as divine, idiotic slapstick, his foot caught on a loose extension cord snaking across the floor. He didn't just stumble, he pitched forward, all his momentum carrying him. His arms flailed out, the drill flying from his grasp. His body slammed hard into the wall right next to me, his shoulder connecting with the old, exposed metal water pipe with a sickening metallic thump. There was a shower of sparks from the ancient, cloth-wrapped wiring near the pipe, a loud crack that sounded like a gunshot, and then absolute total darkness. The whirring of the drill died. The single bare bulb went out. The world was plunged into a silence so profound it was almost as loud as the noise had been. I could hear him groan in the blackness, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. That sound at least was human. That sound broke the spell. I didn't think, I just moved. I scrambled sideways, my hands scraping against the rough concrete wall, crab walking away from the sound of his pain breathing. I bumped into the wooden stairs, turned, and clawed my way up, falling, catching myself, my lungs burning. I burst through the basement door into the kitchen, slammed it shut behind me, and ran. Out the front door across the lawn, not even stopping at my car. I just ran and I didn't look back. Edit 1. Wow, okay, this blew up way more than I expected. My inbox is a mess. Thank you to everyone for the kind words. It helps. A lot of you are asking the same question, so I'll just answer it here. Yes, of course I called the police. What else was I supposed to do? I ran until my lungs felt like they were on fire, and then I hid in some bushes down the street, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. I called 911 from there, babbling like an idiot. I probably didn't make any sense. My friend, Tobias, he has a drill in the basement. Two officers showed up at my location first. I must have looked like a lunatic, covered in dust and sweat, hiding in a hedge. I tried to explain what happened, but even as the words were coming out of my mouth, I could hear how insane they sounded. He said he was going to cleanse my frequency. The look the cops gave each other, it was that look, the one that says, "We've got a live one here." Eventually, they went to Tobias's house. I waited in the back of their car. It felt like an eternity. When they came back, one of them, the older one, leaned in the window, and this is what he said. I will never forget it. He said, "Sir, your friend is very concerned about you." Tobias had been perfect. He'd been calm, rational, and deeply worried. He told them I'd been under a lot of stress lately, that my divorce had hit me harder than I was letting on. He said he'd called me over to help with a minor electrical issue in the basement. According to his story, we were down there, and I just suddenly had a massive panic attack, started screaming about drills, and bolted from the house. They searched the basement, of course they did. They found the drill on the floor right where it had fallen, next to the workbench, just a tool. They saw the extension cord I'd said he tripped on. They saw the old water pipe. The breaker had indeed tripped. Tobias had calmly explained that the old wiring must have shorted when he accidentally bumped the wall. He even showed them a small bruise on his shoulder. Everything I said had happened, but he had a perfectly rational, mundane explanation for it all. There were no signs of a struggle. No threats, just one friend's word against another's, and he was the calm, stable physical therapist. I was the hysterical guy they found hiding in a bush. They didn't charge him. They didn't even file a full report. They called it a welfare check. They drove me home and suggested I make an appointment with a therapist. A therapist. The irony is so thick it could choke you. That was the moment the real horror began. Because when the police car pulled away, I was left standing alone in my driveway, and for the first time, a tiny, poisonous thought crept into my mind. What if he was right? What if I did imagine it all? That seed of doubt was the worst part, worse than the fear in the basement, worse than the frantic escape, because it didn't come from Tobias. It came from inside my own head. For weeks, I was a ghost in my own life. I'd be at work staring at a spreadsheet and I'd lose whole hours. Did I really remember him picking up the drill, or had my panicked brain just latched onto it because it was there? Was his talk about frequencies and entities real, or was it a garbled memory, a dream I'd had that was now bleeding into reality? I was terrified of going to sleep and even more terrified of being awake. My own mind had become a hostile territory. I knew I wasn't crazy, I had to believe that. So I started digging, I became obsessed. I couldn't look at Tobias's social media. The thought of seeing his smiling face with his wife made me physically ill, but I could look at his digital footprint. I spent nights scrolling through his browser history on our shared accounts, his old Amazon orders, anything. It was mostly boring stuff, physical therapy journals, orders for new running shoes, articles about gardening. It was all so painfully normal, it just made me feel even more unhinged. I almost gave up. I was on the verge of actually calling the therapist the cops recommended, of surrendering to the idea that I had just broken. Then I went deeper into our shared email history, searching for any keyword I could think of: energy, spirit, healing. Nothing. Finally, out of sheer desperation, I just started scrolling back in time month by month. It was a digital archaeology of our friendship, jokes, links to stupid videos, plans for dinner. And then I found it, an email from about 4 months before the incident. The subject line was innocuous. FWD, thought you might find this interesting. It was from Tobias. I remembered getting it. I'd glanced at it, seen the words holistic and wellness, and immediately dismissed it as the kind of new age spam his wife was sometimes into. I never even clicked the link. My hand was shaking as I moved the cursor over the blue, underlined text. I clicked. It took me to a website. It was professionally designed, all soothing blues and greens, with pictures of serene-looking people meditating in sun-drenched fields. It was for something called the Ethelred Institute for Bioresonance. At first glance, it looked like any other wellness retreat. Then I started reading. It was all there. Page after page of pseudoscientific jargon, the exact words Tobias had used. Energetic parasites, cellular frequency disruption, negative attachments. They had testimonials, articles, a whole fabricated science built around the idea that human suffering was caused by invisible entities that could be forcibly removed. And then I went to the Our Methods page. My blood ran cold. There was a gallery of their proprietary tools for purification. They were all variations of the same thing. Industrial-grade power tools, sanders, polishers, and drills. Each one, the site claimed, was calibrated to a specific purifying frequency designed to decouple parasitic consciousness from the host's biofield. There was a picture, a stock photo of a smiling practitioner holding a drill, almost identical to the one Tobias owned. Underneath it, the caption read, "Our flagship device, the resonant wand for deep-seated entity removal." He wasn't just crazy, he had been taught. He wasn't having a psychotic break. He was following a manual. This wasn't a random act of madness. It was a procedure, and I was his patient. Final update, I never called the police again. What would I show them? A website. They'd look at me with that same pitying expression and suggest a different therapist. There's no law against believing in bullshit. There's no way to prove intent when the person holding the weapon genuinely, truly believes they are saving your life. The truth didn't set me free. It caged me in a much larger, more terrifying prison. The world I thought I knew, a world of cause and effect, of good people and bad people, shattered. It was replaced by a world where my best friend, a kind and gentle man, could be reprogrammed by a website into thinking that drilling a hole in me was an act of love. That's a horror you can't explain to anyone. It's a horror that doesn't leave a mark except on the inside. I moved. I packed 2 suitcases, got in my car, and drove for 7 hours until I hit a city where I knew no one. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my family. I just disappeared. I abandoned my job, my apartment, my friends, our friends. I couldn't face them. I couldn't face their questions or their inevitable siding with Tobias, the sane one. The real cost of that day wasn't the fear or the loss of my best friend, it was the loss of trust. Not just in him, but in everything, in the surface of things. Now I look at people, a smiling barista, a friendly neighbor, a helpful stranger, and a part of my brain is always asking, what do you believe? What manual are you following? I'm sitting in my new apartment now. It's sterile and empty. It doesn't feel like home. A few minutes ago, some construction started on the street below. I heard that sound, that low, familiar whirring of a drill, and I didn't just jump, I saw him. For a split second, I saw Tobias's face, clear as day, not angry or hateful, but filled with that awful, compassionate, zealous light, convinced he was the hero of my story. I survived the basement, but I'm not sure I'll ever truly escape it.